Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of the LinkedIn Ads Insider, where we've got today a topic which might not be everyone's most exciting topic, but is certainly very important, and that is all about measurement and attribution and how to measure success when it comes to your LinkedIn ads. So this is a hot topic when it comes to LinkedIn, and that's because most people often get it wrong. And if you get it wrong, you can end up with turning off a channel which actually could be doing a lot for your business. But if you don't know how to properly measure it, then you can end up underestimating the value that that's delivering to your overall marketing, and you can shut the channel off when you really shouldn't be. George, to dive in first of all, where do people mainly get this wrong in your opinion when it comes to measurement and LinkedIn ads?
Yeah, it's a really important topic, and I think people underestimate how important it is often. The most common mistake that we see is just defaulting to the most kind of basic metrics that Campaign Manager gives you. So basically, when you start running LinkedIn ads for the first time, the metrics that you tend to gravitate towards are click-through rate on individual ads and campaigns, and then, whatever you're calling them, leads or conversions, whatever it is. And I suppose people go there because they're metrics that are familiar. Everyone's heard of click-through rate. Everyone understands what a conversion or a lead is. So it makes total sense. But they're actually pretty poor proxies for the actual impact that the channel's delivering and what the channel is really there to do. And if you just chase a higher click-through rate or more leads, you have this kind of issue with misaligned incentives. You can drive that figure up, that metric up, by doing some really stupid things. So I think that, what would be really good to discuss on this episode is, to get your take on why people struggle, but then how we approach this. Because we've been on a bit of a journey when it comes to measurement and attribution ourselves. We've been doing this for a good few years now. And we started, I think, more or less where most people start, by looking at the click-through rate and the number of leads that are being generated. And over the years, we've developed a much more sophisticated perspective and framework and set of metrics that we now use consistently across all our clients, that I'm sure we'll talk about as well. But yeah, to bounce it back to you, what do you see as the kind of key reasons that people struggle with this on the channel?
I think it comes down to the mindset of how you approach the channel. I think most people, they see LinkedIn ads as it should be that you run some ads, and then from those ads, you're going to get direct return in terms of leads and new business coming through. And we just know that that's not how the channel performs or how it fits as part of the marketing ecosystem. And that's because of how people behave on LinkedIn. When they're on LinkedIn, they're not there kind of searching for a solution. They're not there shopping. They're not there to buy. They're literally just going through the feed, trying to learn something new, trying to engage with people, trying to connect with people, sharing their opinion every now and again. They're certainly not there to buy. So it's not a sort of channel that sits at the end of our bar journey, and it's not a last touch channel. What it does really well is it influences the journey. So it makes people, your prospects, because of its targeting, aware of who you are, why they should listen to you, why you're trustworthy, what you can help them with. And then what that means is that builds up something that we talk a lot about. It builds up mental availability. And mental availability is basically that when they are in market, when they're eventually in market, which we know in B2B marketing doesn't happen that often. We're aware of the kind of 95-5 rule, where at any one time, only about 5% of your audience is in market looking to buy. So our job with the ads is to, with that 95% who are early in our journey, build up mental availability. Then that means that when they become the 5%, you're the no-brainer, you're the choice they're going to go to. And then they're going to come to you with their inquiry, with their business. But when they come to you, they don't wait until they see the next ad and then convert. That would just be crazy. Once they have a need, they'll come and seek you out. And often what that means is that LinkedIn ads has done the heavy lifting of getting your brand known, building up your reputation, building up that mental availability. But then when they actually go to convert, they go straight through to your website, by Googling your brand or going directly through to your website on the URL, and they'll convert that way. And then when you look at CRMs and a lot of attribution models, they only really look at the last touch. So you will then come to the conclusion of, okay, all of this business is coming through Google or coming through search or direct through to our website. And LinkedIn is completely missed then in that attribution journey, and it doesn't get the credit it deserves. So when you're looking through which channels has delivered what ROI, thinking they all kind of work in a silo. You won't see LinkedIn with a huge number next to it. So you end up saying, okay, we're investing this money in LinkedIn. Maybe that's not paying off. Let's turn off the channel. When in reality, that could be the main driver of that awareness of your business and influencing that pipeline. So I think it's just a mindset of how you view LinkedIn ads as part of the marketing mix and as your overall marketing ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this firsthand with our clients. We've had clients that have said, struggling to prove the ROI on this spend, so I'm going to switch off the channel and just see what happens. And what happens is about 3 or 4 months later, their PPC performance went off a cliff.
Yeah.
And, that's a kind of really hard way of learning that lesson. 2 lessons, really. One, all of this stuff is multi-channel. Like marketing is always multi-channel. And that's because the user experience is multi-channel. Users aren't just using one channel in a silo. They're always active across a bunch of different channels, and you need to be able to kind of understand how they influence each other. But it's also about, like, as you put it, if you're only measuring clicks and conversions, you're only measuring like the very last chapter of quite a long book.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And there's all this stuff that happens before that action that you need to find a way of kind of modeling out. So you can feel confident that this stuff will happen soon. And I think that's where people need to get to. Do you know what I mean? You need visibility of what's going on earlier in the buyer journey.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes when it comes to marketing is the brands that are known get bought.
Yeah.
And I think people miss that. They kind of feel like if someone's in market, they're going to search and they're going to eventually find me and they're going to come to me. But that's not the case. When someone is looking for a solution, they've already really made up their mind of who they're going to work with, or have shortlisted at least 2 to 3 vendors that they want to speak to. So if you're only entering that journey right at the end when they're looking for a solution, you've already kind of lost and you're not going to win that work. But it's understandable how people kind of get this wrong when it comes to measurement and expectations when it comes to LinkedIn ads, because actually how you do it is quite complicated and it's quite complex. And like you said, this has been a journey for us. So we've kind of worked this out over years, and it's always still developing as well. Attribution, I don't think, is ever complete as a model or ever perfect, but we've come up with this framework, which we think is the best way to be able to judge whether your ads are doing the job within the feed, which is going to lead to the outcome which we all want, which is more new clients, more pipeline, more revenue. And also of that revenue, how much of that has been influenced by LinkedIn ads? What impact has LinkedIn ads had on that new revenue into your business?
With that said, should we start talking about the framework and how we do this at Winbox?
Yeah, sure. So we devised a framework and we spent a little bit of time putting this together. And the framework is basically, it's an equation of reach times relevance times engagement equals pipeline influence. And what this means is you've got those 3 areas there of reach, relevance and engagement. And that all relates to what LinkedIn ads, what your ads are doing within the feed, how they're reaching and engaging people within the feed. So I'll break them down one by one. But if you get all of those right, if you're doing your job within the feed, what that would mean then is that LinkedIn is going to influence that pipeline. And then we have ways to measure how much of an influence LinkedIn is having on that pipeline. So to go through reach first. So this is really important because of that quote I mentioned before, the brands that get known get bought. So this is about making sure you're being seen by your ICP, but also making sure that you're showing up in front of them enough.
Yeah.
So the metrics we look at here is we look at impressions and we look at cost per 1,000 impressions to make sure that we are actually being shown, we're winning auctions and your ads are being shown. But then we look at frequency and audience penetration as really important reach metrics, which a lot of people tend to overlook. So frequency is how often are your ads being shown over a 30-day period. And we aim for here, we want people to see our ads kind of between 4 to 8 times over a 30-day period. And that tends to then be a good cadence to be remembered, to get known, to get your message across, but not to show up too often so that you're burning them out and they're just fed up with seeing your ads.
Yeah.
So that's the frequency that we aim for. And then there's audience penetration, which is how much of our ICP, of our audience, are we reaching with our ads? And we want to make sure that's enough. So we kind of aim for at least above 50% here, because we want to make sure that we're finding people that are either in market now or going to be in market in the near future, and reaching more of our audience gives us a better chance of that.
Yeah.
So that's what we're looking at in quite some detail as well. So they're really kind of overlooked metrics when it comes to measuring LinkedIn ads and how the ads are doing in the feed. So the next one is relevance. So it's all well and good your ads being shown, but you actually want to make sure that people are consuming that content. So relevance is all about, are we stopping people in the scroll, and are they consuming our content so they get to know our message? So here, the key metric you look at here is dwell time. And this is a relatively new metric from LinkedIn. They released this about 6 months ago, I think, or midway through last year.
Yeah. And
this is basically how long people are spending viewing one of your ads. And we know the benchmark here is 2.5 seconds. So people would typically spend 2.5 seconds looking at an ad. So if we're exceeding that benchmark, we know that actually that ad or that post is relevant and people are consuming that content. So the likelihood of them remembering us and our message is much greater.
Yeah.
So that's a key metric we look at there.
It's worth noting quickly on that one. Maybe you could explain why that's better than click-through rate.
It's better than click-through rate because a vast majority of people, and it's a really important point, the vast majority of people don't click on ads.
Yeah.
If you think about on LinkedIn, a good click-through rate is like 0.5%. People are happy with that. That's good. That means 99.5% of people don't click on ads.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that that ad hasn't had an impact and they haven't consumed it. It's just that they've consumed it within the feed. And that's what people want to do. They want to consume the content within the feed. They're not on LinkedIn to kind of click through to third-party websites and to leave LinkedIn. They're in the feed for a reason. They want to spend time there. Also with clicks, what's quite interesting is when we looked at the data, because most of the consumption on LinkedIn is happening on a mobile device.
Yeah.
So when people are on their mobile, when they click through to your website, when they're on a mobile, they don't tend to do a deep dive into a site. They won't spend a lot of time clicking around just because it's kind of small internet mobile. So they do just a short search. So the time on site is actually really low, and a lot of people won't convert on the form on their mobile as well.
Yeah.
So the traffic we're driving to our website, which often we're paying a premium for because LinkedIn is quite expensive, actually isn't going to be that high intent or that high quality. It's going to be quality in terms of the audience member that's going there, but not necessarily in terms of what they're going to do on the site. So we don't want to optimize just for driving traffic to the website through clicks because we know they're not going to spend much time on there anyway. We want to lean into the behavior that they want to take, which is actually consuming and engaging with your content within the feed, because that has a big impact then on building up that mental availability.
Yep.
So also for relevance, just going back to the metrics that we look at there, also we look at video view rate. So we run a lot of video ads. Video is really important for LinkedIn. We spoke about this in previous episodes. And so we want to make sure that people are consuming enough of that video for us to be able to see that actually, yeah, that content is relevant. People are enjoying it. They're consuming it. So we should do more of that, or we should kind of double down on those ads.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, video is just becoming more important. It's a really good illustrator of like this issue around click-through rate, because often you see a lower click-through rate on video than you do on single image ads. But that does not mean that it's having less of an impact. In fact, it's kind of the opposite.
Yeah.
So it's just a really good illustration of the way that, like, if you boil everything down to clicks, you're kind of focusing on the wrong things. Yeah. And if you're looking to influence people, video is like probably the best way to do that on the channel, despite the fact that it's probably going to get a much lower click-through rate than a single image ad.
Yeah. And look, we used to obsess over clicks with all of our campaigns. That was the main metric we were looking at.
That was like my
success.
Job.
Yeah.
Just driving up the click-through rate.
That's it. Yeah. And understandably. And I think that's still where most advertisers are at.
Yeah.
But we have learned over time that actually that's not the best measure of success. We want to, again, as I said, kind of lean into the behavior that people want to take, which is engaging within the feed.
Yes.
So if we have that mindset, and if we're looking to create content which engages people within the feed, our ads are going to stand out far more than our competitors or our clients' competitors, because we're leaning into the behavior that they want to take rather than trying to force them through to a website so that the number of clicks or traffic we're driving is looking good.
Yeah.
So that's it. So we got reach, we got relevance. So next up is engagement. So this is where we look at clicks.
Hey.
So we look at how people are engaging with the ads, because this is showing signals of intent and signals of interest if they're taking that level of engagement. So we're looking here at click-through rate. We're looking at cost per click. We're looking at engagement rate as well, though, because this takes into account how much they are engaging with the ads within the feed, which is really important. We got our benchmarks there, so we want to make sure we're exceeding those benchmarks. But what we do with this information is really helpful for businesses because it's first-party intent data. So then through LinkedIn, you've got the companies tab and you've got lots of demographic information to be able to tell you which companies are engaging with your ads and to what level and what's their engagement level. So what we can do is we could pull these reports and we can send them to sales teams, and then sales teams, they can use that information to guide their outbound activity. If you've got an account and over the last month, their engagement with your ads has grown 300%, that's a good signal of intent. So what a salesperson should be doing is picking up on that signal and saying, okay, let's connect in with the ICP within this company and let's reach out to them, not in a kind of big brother creepy way of, hey, I've seen you clicking our ads, do you want to have a conversation? But just kind of subtly dropping in whether there is a buy-in need at the moment there and whether a conversation should happen is a great way to kind of utilize that intent data. People can do this in automated ways now as well, with lots of different tools that are out there to have this kind of automated follow-up. But it can be as simple as your sales team, they'll have their activities anyway for DMs and emails and calls, and just using that intent data to guide that to make sure they're talking to ideally warm prospects rather than doing cold outreach all the time.
Perfect. Nice.
So that's the kind of in-feed metrics, reach, relevance, engagement. If you're doing all of that right and you're exceeding the benchmarks, what you will see is obviously what we're all here for, what we're advertising on LinkedIn for, which is that overall increase in pipeline, getting more inbound leads or more leads into your business essentially. So that's where we look at now pipeline influence, and calling it pipeline influence is really important, because if you are just measuring LinkedIn ad success based on last touch attribution, you will be disappointed just because of that fact of LinkedIn reaches people early in their buyer journey. So what we want to look at is, of the deals that's come into our business, whatever route they've come through, have they been influenced by LinkedIn ads in some way? And set up an attribution model where we're satisfied that actually if they've engaged with the ads to that level, then they have been influenced by the ads, so it's played its job in that journey. And there's lots of different tools which we'll come on to, which you can use to help measure that. But I want to see of my overall pipeline, how much of that has been influenced by LinkedIn ads, of my overall closed won revenue, how much of that has been influenced by LinkedIn ads and what are those specific deals. And then also metrics such as like deal velocity. So of the deals have been influenced by LinkedIn ads, do they close quicker? And the average deal value, are they bigger deals? Are they worth more to us because they've been influenced by LinkedIn ads? So these other metrics that you can add on to that as well to see the true value that LinkedIn is delivering to your business.
Yeah. I mean, really what you should be seeing, we usually say like give it about 6 months to start seeing these signals, but just the pipeline becoming fuller and healthier, like deals moving faster. You won't always know for sure exactly where all of those deals came from, and like you'll know the last thing that they did, like the actual like source of the conversion. But you should see an overall uplift in the number of deals and the speed at which they close or qualify.
Which is a lot for people to get their head around, I think, as businesses, and especially as senior stakeholders. They still see this as, no, I'm spending X, I should see very clearly that X has delivered Y. But it comes on to a point that you mentioned earlier, which is that you need to have an ecosystem working together. You need to have different channels that work together in the mix that all play their part. And I've seen a stat recently, which is that before a prospect becomes a deal, there's 72 touch points that happens before that. And that's going to happen on multiple channels. And I don't know, what's your perspective in kind of getting over that hurdle of accepting that actually LinkedIn influences revenue is not going to be a last touch with leads, but actually it's going to be a major contributor to your pipeline?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I mean, I think for us specifically, we obviously do this for our clients, but we do it for our own business as well. And it's almost more instructive, I think, to talk about this from the perspective of our own business for two reasons. It's easy to say this kind of stuff when you're spending someone else's money. And like most marketers, unless they are like the business owners, they're getting budget from their leadership team and they're investing it. When we do it for Winbox, we are spending our own money on the marketing, and we invest quite heavily in marketing while making peace with the fact that we will never know absolutely, which deals came from which channels. The way that I've kind of made peace with that, and the way I think about it, is that you have to see, like, overall, is it working? And while we can't say for sure that, like, every lead in our CRM is perfectly attributed, we're getting enough leads and enough of them are closing to make me look at the like return on marketing investment overall and saying the system works. I don't know for sure, I can't say, well, 30% of the system is attributed to this and another 18% is attributed to that. But I know directionally speaking that we're putting money in and we're getting a return of like 3 to 4 on it. And I think that's kind of where you have to get to. Obviously that can be easier said than done. One of the advantages maybe for us, while it is kind of like our money that we're spending on it, is we don't have to justify that to ourselves.
Yeah.
In quite the same way that marketers sometimes have to do. And I can imagine that if you don't work in marketing and marketing people come over to you and start talking about mental availability and stuff like that, you might be a little bit like, look, just tell me what the return on investment is going to be on this 50 grand investment.
Yeah.
And it might sound a bit like smoke and mirrors. But the sad fact is that attribution is, and to some extent always has been, a bit of a pipe dream.
Yeah.
It's not like it was ever all worked out and perfectly kind of attributable. It's just that now marketers are waking up to the fact that a lot of MarTech vendors made it seem like that was a reasonable expectation. When it really, it never was. My background's B2C, and in B2C, they're much more comfortable with the idea that, like, first most important thing is being known, liked, and trusted.
Yeah.
And, like, if you're in that position, you're going to make it into people's consideration sets, and then when they enter a buying cycle, they should come to you. And B2B's on that journey. But I actually think that, like, it's come forward so far. In the past few years. I mean, these conversations just weren't happening 5 years ago. Everyone was still talking about, like, the right message at the right time, perfectly attributed. So we're getting there. We really are. We talked about this on a podcast before in terms of helping stakeholders kind of go on that journey and look at this differently. It is about having a replacement framework. Like, you can't replace the kind of lead gen model with nothing. Like, you have to have something, a case that you can go to stakeholders with and say, that's the wrong way to measure this and here's the right way. Obviously I'm biased, but I think our framework is a great one for that. And for anyone that's listening to this and is like, I could do with more of a deep dive on it than a conversation, maybe like actually like see some of the graphs, and you can read about it in detail on our website, on our blog. But yeah, that would be my advice. Like, make peace with the fact that the old model is probably unrealistic and come up with a new model and pitch that internally.
Yeah, and that's what we've learned with the clients that we work with, is that you need to get that buy-in up front. You can't allow them to set their own expectations up front in terms of what success is going to look like, and then kind of 6 months in try and shoe in that actually we're looking at influence revenue and here's measurement framework. We know we need to get aligned on that expectation up front, which is where having a framework is great, because you've got someone to talk through them in terms of, like, this is how we view success looks like on LinkedIn. Here's what it's going to look like for you, and here's how we know if it's working or it's not working, and getting that alignment and that buy-in up front. Because then as soon as they are aligned with up front, I mean, we find this with influence revenue, and that's how LinkedIn works and where it sits in the buyer journey. The conversations after that just become so much easier when it comes to measuring success. But if you don't have that conversation up front, which can be a bit tricky sometimes, because people do need to get over that hurdle of, I just thought people clicking an ad and then convert. Can be tricky sometimes, but it's important that you have that and have that in some detail, and you don't kind of leave that unchecked when you start a new LinkedIn campaign. Yeah,
that's a really good point, actually. I think that, certainly in terms of how we do this, obviously we're an agency, but this is part of our sales process. And we're educating people on how we measure success before they're even a client. And for in-house marketers, measurement isn't like a retrospective thing. It's like a planning tool. So, like, if you try and do this retroactively and you say, over the past 6 months, how have we performed? It's almost too late. Like, this should be part of your planning cycle. So, if you're doing quarterly planning right now, at the start of Q4, if you're planning for next year, locking down your measurement framework for next year is something that should be happening now. Because ultimately it's going to dictate and guide most of your big decisions around, like, what campaigns you're going to run, how much you're going to spend on them, why you're actually doing any of this, etc.
And so should we dive into the tools now of, like, how to measure that pipeline?
Sure. Let's do it.
Because there are lots of tools out there now to help you with this, and there's new tools popping up all of the time as well. Some are much more expensive than others, but there's third-party tools that you could use. So the established ones are like Dream Data, Hockey Stack, and obviously they can measure other channels as well. Fibbler is a really good one, which is specifically for LinkedIn ads created by people who really know LinkedIn ads as well and understand it. So that's a good one. And what these tools will do is they will act as a sync between your CRM and your LinkedIn ads activity, and they'll be able to show you then how much of your pipeline and which deals have been influenced by LinkedIn ads, and they'll be able to show you more of the journey that prospect has gone on as well,
Yeah.
in terms of from what campaigns they were seeing impressions from, what they were clicking on, right the way through to conversion. And those tools can be great as part of your armory for being able to judge LinkedIn ad success. Also, LinkedIn have their own tools. And what we noticed that probably at the start of last year is this is an area LinkedIn were really starting to invest heavily in, and are increasing the amount of options that you have within LinkedIn for measuring success and around this influence pipeline. So the key tools within LinkedIn are, you want to make sure that you've got the insight tag set up on your website. So you could do conversion event tracking within LinkedIn. You can track then things like button clicks on submitting a form within your website through to LinkedIn. So you can see which ads and which campaigns are contributing to conversions.
Yeah.
And also you want the conversion API set up, so often called CAPI. And again, this is a sync between your CRM and LinkedIn. And this will then open up a few tools within LinkedIn that can help you to see this pipeline influence. So the tool that we try to get set up with for our clients from a LinkedIn perspective is something called the Revenue Attribution Report. And this sits within Business Manager. And this will tell you when a deal is added into your CRM, and it works with HubSpot, Salesforce, or Dynamics at the moment. So when a deal is added to your CRM or a deal is won in your CRM, it will cross-reference that information with your LinkedIn ads activity, and it'll give you some really important metrics. It will give you an overall score on how much revenue has been influenced by LinkedIn in terms of closed revenue, how much your pipeline that you've generated has been influenced by LinkedIn, and also the deal velocity information. It will give you that information as well.
Yeah.
Recently, they added an export feature as well. So you can export, okay, which of these specific deals is it that they're talking about? So if it's saying 200K's worth of pipeline, what deals is that attributed to? And that can just help them with that conversation of, we had this prospect, they landed, maybe they come through Google, but we can see actually there's 200 paid engagements here. So we know that LinkedIn had a big impact on that journey, and it just helps with that justification of the channel. I think that they're the tools you can use, and there's a few more in there as well. So you've got LinkedIn tools, you've got these third-party tools. One tactic as well, which I think is undervalued, is self-reported attribution.
Yes.
So we use this a lot. And this is basically just asking people, ideally in the form where they convert, how did you hear about us?
Yeah.
And having that as a free form field. It's based on human input, so it's not going to be perfect, but it can just give you some nice insight into the channel that had the biggest influence on that journey.
Yeah.
And the channels that are maybe being hidden by the tools, where maybe cookies haven't fired, or the CAPI just hasn't worked somehow. There've been different naming dimensions on their company names, things like that. We know we can't rely fully on the technology. It just gives you that extra data point. And then I think what you want to do ideally is you want to put all of these data points together with an understanding that attribution is not going to be perfect. So you're not going to know everything just because of how complex B2B buyer journeys are, to kind of give you a holistic view of, okay, is this working? Is this contributing enough for us to continue investing in the channel, or ideally invest more in the channel, because then we know we'll get more results?
Yeah. If people are kind of listening to this and they're looking for a starting point, you know, because obviously you've listed out a few options there that are really good, and that's everything that we do. But where should people start if they want to, you know, obviously self-reported attribution is a bit of a no-brainer, because you just whack an extra field on the form and, you know, a decent set of drop-down options. But where else? What are some good starting points?
Yeah, I think to start with, you want to have the insight tag and ideally CAPI set up.
Yeah.
So you could do conversion tracking within LinkedIn, because then at least you'll be able to see within LinkedIn that actually, yes, your ads are leading to conversions. And then you can do the deep dive into, okay, what were those conversions? Who were they? How much were they worth?
Yeah.
But as a starting point, you want to know that actually they are impacting pipeline and it's working in that respect. And obviously you can see then which campaigns or which ads are having the biggest influence. So I think that's the starting point. Use the companies tab as well. So you can do this manually. You don't need to have a big technical setup if you just getting started. So the companies tab sits within LinkedIn Campaign Manager, and it just shows you all of the companies that are engaging with your ads or engaging organically with your company page. And then what you can do is at the end of the month, you can say, okay, let's look through all of the leads that we had through in the past month. Maybe there's 50, and let's just cross-reference to see what engagement level these 50 leads had with our LinkedIn ads. And you can start seeing then that actually, okay, this lead come through, we didn't realize this is through LinkedIn, but there's loads of paid engagements here, there's a high engagement level, so it's clear that it had an impact. we don't know. We can't read people's minds, and journeys are complex. So it can be a case, and we've seen this, where you've got some prospects that actually they've got 10 impressions, but they converted into a lead because they've seen it at the right time, right place. And then we have other prospects that actually it's been hundreds of thousands of impressions over time, and then finally they can convert. So you're never going to know exactly the influence that those ads had on that overall purchase or overall conversion. And I think you need to come to terms with that and be okay with that. But that's a good starting point, I think I would say, is that set up the insight tag in your website, set up CAPI, but then just look at that companies tab and maybe do a bit of manual attribution.
Yeah, I really like those suggestions, because I think that where people often start with this stuff is they'll be like, yeah, let's buy some tools.
Yeah.
And these measurement tools can be surprisingly expensive. I mean, you mentioned a couple at the start there, like Dream Data and Hockey Stack. I mean, they're like 10 grand a month or something for some of their plans. As a general rule of thumb, like, don't spend as much or even half as much on measurement as you do on media.
Yeah.
Because you hear about this happening, usually at larger companies, is they're like, yeah, we'll happily invest in paid media, but we want to know exactly the return on investment we're going to get. So they spend, not far off what they're spending on media, on measurement. And you just think it's going to be really hard to drive an ROI. Yeah. If that's how you're approaching it. And you still end up with a slightly opaque view. Yeah. Right? Because that's just the nature of the beast. Nice. Yeah, I think they're really good suggestions. Something we've not talked about, which I think is important, is like the difference between measuring like campaigns and measuring individual pieces of creative. Yeah. And people will get these things kind of like confused in their minds. And we kind of divide this between the two of us at Winbox for our clients, don't we? So you'll be looking at like overall campaign health. And I'll often be analysing individual pieces of creative or the creative within those campaigns and trying to pull out trends. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about, practically, when you are deciding, is a LinkedIn ads campaign working? Is it doing what it's supposed to do? What are some of the questions that you're asking and how are you doing it?
I'm looking at the benchmarks against how they're performing within the feed, against my expectations. And that depends on the ad format. So if it's a video ads, then we know that actually the click-through rate is not going to be that high, but we want to look at video view rate, because that's what we're trying to do there is to get as many people to watch as much of our video as possible, because then we're communicating our message. If it is a thought leader ad, we're looking for that engagement rate. We're looking at dwell time, because we want people to be reading that post and engaging with it within the feed. So that's the first thing I'm looking at is it doing its job within the feed? Because I know then that if the product is good, if we've got the audience right, and we've the creative is right, then it's going to eventually lead to pipeline. And that depends on people's buying cycle and sometimes seasonality. So I want to make sure from a campaign perspective it's doing its job within the feed. And then you can look at, okay, of those campaigns, which ones are getting conversions overall. And that helps me to determine then that it is impacting pipeline. But understanding that not every ad format, its job is to impact pipeline. Sometimes it's just to get known and just to engage people in the feed. So that's mainly from a campaign perspective, what I'm looking at. And then you'll have the overall metrics of what we went into detail on in terms of how much pipeline overall is this influencing? Is the overall pipeline for this client or for our own business, is that increasing with these different changes we're making over time? And are they hitting the kind of the benchmarks that we're happy with? Nice.
And when they're not, because obviously, some campaigns perform really well. Yeah. Some ads perform really well. But you do occasionally drop below benchmark. So how do you approach that then?
Yeah, I think you want to try and determine why. Yeah. So you look at, okay, is our audience off? Have we not been bidding properly? So from a technical standpoint, you can look at that setup and to see whether they're hitting benchmarks or not. If we're quite satisfied with that, then usually it comes down to the creative. Yes. Is it an ad that actually traditionally was performing really well and now has just been burnt out and it's just not performing anymore? So it needs replacing. Is it an ad where actually it just didn't land very well in the feed, or the message isn't resonating, so we need to try something different? But that's more so kind of in your domain then, in terms of like, what do we look at to see whether an ad is performing or not? So how do you approach this from a creative standpoint?
Yeah, ads can either perform, way above benchmark, more or less on benchmark, or less than. I think generally it's good to aim always kind of like comfortably high above benchmarks, because from my perspective, benchmark just doesn't mean an ad's amazing. It means an ad is fine.
Yeah.
But you want to be amazing, right, in the feed to cut through and get noticed. No matter whether it's kind of above or below, first thing is just to kind of look at the creative and identify the kind of drivers of success or failure. It's really important. I literally posted about this morning on LinkedIn. It's really important not to leap to conclusions. What people do, especially when they first start doing this, is they will leap to conclusions about why an ad is doing what it's doing. So if you've got one ad that's, just on benchmark and one ad that's half of that, they'll say, oh, it's because of the headline, or it's because of the background, or it's because of this picture, or whatever it is. That may be the case. It may not be the case. The tricky thing with ad creative is it's completely flat. So it's not like a landing page where you can, heat map it and you can use Tag Manager to tag up buttons in such a way that you can see, like, are people clicking on this button or that button? Unless you're A/B testing, you don't really know specifically what it is. And I think that, like, often the conclusions that you draw will say more about you than the ad. So, you stick an ad in front of a designer and say, this has got double the click-through rate of that. They'll say, that's because of the design, isn't it? Yeah. Because of the colours.
Yeah.
You stick it in front of a copywriter, they'll say because of the headline. So everyone kind of gravitates to the things that they know best. What I prefer to do is just take a step back, try and take myself out of the equation as much as possible and just look for big picture patterns. So are kind of text-only ads outperforming ads with images in them? If there are images of products outperforming ads with images of people? Are ads with buttons in this stage of the campaign outperforming ads without? If you've got a little row of logos, of great companies you work with, are those ads doing better than ones without any kind of social proof? So it's not kind of saying like that button copy is the reason that campaign is smashing it, because it's just impossible to know. It's more like big picture trends based on what we all know about ad performance and the different things that drive ad performance. There are different things that are likely to stop the scroll, like close-up pictures of faces, pictures of animals, pattern interrupt, doing something weird. Those things are good at stopping the scroll. They're not necessarily good at driving clicks. So my advice for people who are kind of getting started with this is try not to leap quickly to big conclusions or draw out really kind of granular insights. Instead, kind of take a step back and just look for big picture, like, are there patterns in the data? And maybe over time start to build up, like, I kind of have a little bank in my head of things I just know perform well because I've made hundreds of ads and looked at how they perform. But have a little kind of a set of go-tos in your head that you can test around. Maybe that's something we can talk about in the future. What those tricks are. That's the key thing from my perspective.
Nice, sound advice.
Yeah.
Cool. So when it comes to measurement and attribution then on LinkedIn, what would you say are your closing remarks that the audience should remember?
Yeah, I think mainly it would be to not default to the kind of, quote unquote common sense approach, to look for a more sophisticated model that takes into account how people actually use the channel and how people actually buy stuff. Ours, I think, is a good starting point. You don't have to use ours. I'm sure there are others out there, although there's not many, funnily enough. I think I haven't come across too many. But and then just to see it as a journey. Measurement and attribution is really complex, and it's not something you're going to crack first time. It's taken us the development of our model and rolling it out to our clients and really putting it to work. It's about 5 years' work.
Yeah.
So see it as a journey and know that it's a journey worth taking. Because if you get measurement wrong, you get just about everything else wrong as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's about coming to terms with how the channel is going to work for you and getting others alignment on that from the start, like senior stakeholders. The fact that it's not, for most businesses, going to be that last touch channel where people in a perfect world see an ad, click on an ad, and then convert. It's just not going to be that. It is going to be an influencer of pipeline. It's, for most B2B businesses, the best way for them to reach your audience consistently with your message, because senior decision makers are active on LinkedIn and the targeting is so precise if you get it right. So it's going to be the best way for you to reach your audience, and that's the job it's doing. And then when people are in market, they're looking to buy, if your ads have done their job, they're going to come to you. And there's tools and means then available to be able to measure of those businesses that have become clients or have become deals, what influence has LinkedIn had on that, but understanding that it will be an influence most of the time rather than last touch. There are some brands which will get a high volume of like last touch, bottom of the funnel leads on LinkedIn. The exception that I have found here is that if there is like one decision maker in the buyer decision making unit, so if it's say a proposition that's just for the CEO and they can make that decision and they can purchase and is maybe not like a huge cost, then you could get a good amount of last touch conversions within the channel. But mostly for B2B brands, they're quite complex purchases, they're high ticket items. There's like 8 to 12 people involved in the decision making unit. So that expectation for someone just to make that call and to click on an ad and then convert is largely unrealistic. You want to reach multiple people within that decision making unit. They have their conversations. Once they're in market, hopefully multiple of them say, yeah, this is the right solution, and they will come to you.
Nice. Perfect. Well, with all of that being said, that was hopefully a really useful chat about an important topic. If anyone has any questions, definitely leave a comment and ask. And as always, you can reach out on LinkedIn if you need help with anything to do with measurement and attribution as well.
Cheers, everyone. See you next time.
See ya.